Let's get going. All right. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Triple Play. Please remember to
like and subscribe.
All right. And if you're interested in any financial planning, remember to support those that support us and reach out to Resource One at 636-458-1798 or Chris with CS Design, who did our intro, outro, website, and lots of good stuff. 573-436-3717. He'd love to help you personally or your company to grow and accomplish what it needs to accomplish. Also, if you haven't, you need to check out our website and get some merch. We've got mugs, we got signed balls, we've got t-shirts, hats, so all sorts of good stuff. Remember to check out that. And also, when you do, you'll always see the latest episode is up on there. The YouTube video is up on there. And if you go to episodes, you can see all the places where we are now on, which is like 32 different places. So you can pretty much find Triple Play on anything that does podcast out there. So with that today's guest is a personal friend of mine. He is awesome in every way possible. We grew up together, and man, I'm very thankful for that. And I'm sure you are too, but I know I am. And we're going to talk about his life and his journey today because it's something that I know defined a lot of who you are, but it also defined me in different ways. So I'm interested. I don't know if you know some of the things that I've had to reflect on over the years, but it'll be interesting to hear what you have to say. Anyways, that being said, my earliest thoughts about you, in your family. Your family's kind of my earliest thoughts for a lot of things, and it was when we came to St. Louis. We moved in. And your dad and mom and all of you guys at that time, you and James, and me and Jen, and along would come later on, Rebecca and Justin, would hang out. And your dad, one of my coolest memories is back in the early 80s, that snowstorm. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. That's a really fond memory.
Yeah. So the big snowstorm in the 80s that everybody always talks about, like where there was like 2 foot and the whole city shut down for like a week. His dad dug like a trail between our houses.
Oh, yeah.
And said, got board games, come on over and hang.
Yeah.
So, and we wound up spending like the next 2 days hanging out and having so much fun.
Yeah, I guess the snow wasn't over our heads, but felt like it was. It was tall.
It was definitely. Well, and I think the big piles, I remember our dads helped us make piles and we made big old igloos. I mean, we didn't have to, like, when I do with my kids, it's like they've got to get really close down, but we were like almost standing, I would say, like, just touched down a little bit. So it was really, really fun. Yeah. A lot of fun times.
Did you guys grow up like from babies till like, how long were your neighbors? When did you guys start hanging out? Was it like?
That's a great question. So when I was about 4 or 5 years old, we moved up here to St. Louis and we spent just a short period of time in Ellisville. And then my parents bought a house right next to him in Fenton. So I was probably like, would have been going into first grade. I think I finished kindergarten or first grade right in there. I remember first grade was Miss Hall, and I think that's where I came in. So first grade.
Were you there first, Jason?
Yep.
You were there first?
I was there first.
You were waiting for him.
Yeah. But it's cool. Scott asked me, how I knew you, Josh, and start with neighbors, but it's really deeper than that. It's really family.
Yeah.
And it's just cool that God, placed us together there. On Westbourne there in Fenton.
Exactly.
And, he has a way of doing that. He knows what we need down the road.
Isn't that true? Yeah. My last opening game he took me to. I had season tickets for 10 years, and I didn't go for a few years, and he calls me up and says, hey, my son can't go. You want to go hang the opening day? And I'm like, yeah, let's go. I haven't been in a few years. That's always a fun time. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So we grew up next to each other from all the way through high school, basically. My parents moved out to Union when I was going to college, my freshman year of college. Well, really, it was between my freshman and sophomore because it was when I was going to go to MOBAP. So they moved out to Union. And then not too far after that, your mom and Louie built a house too, and they would move. So we kind of, our journey was basically, I think your last year, you went to Northwestern, graduated, right? So we kind of moved out from that neighborhood about the same time too.
I feel like these questions are going to be the questions I have are going to be directed to both. You both are going to have question or answers to my questions. So I guess
That's great.
you know everybody bonds over something. I mean, you guys are neighbors, you guys are family friends, but like there had to be something you guys connected over. Otherwise, you just would have remained like, oh yeah, our family is friends. Like you guys,
Well, you're going to hear part of that. Part of that's the
Right.
story that we're going to get into. There's a big part of that that's going to come in. But
I didn't know if it was initially like, hey, he's got a cool Lego set. Let me go over there, or it was just like our families hang out. So we're
it was the mask toys. The mask toys are still. I still brag about those. Those were way cool.
Uh-huh.
But no, it was. If the things we bonded over were real simple. Our faith. We're both even to this day. I would consider strong believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. And anytime our families have said something about, hey, Jason's getting ready to have another kid, or hey, he's going through some stuff or looking for a job. I mean, the minute I'm praying for him. So, and he goes to the top of my prayer list. Boom, I'm praying and asking the Lord. And I'm anytime that kind of stuff. And then the other things we bonded over, sports, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We played a ton of baseball when we were like middle school through about high school, and then it kind of transitioned into basketball.
Yep.
And the passion for basketball through high school. So a lot of baseball and basketball. I thought I was the greatest pitcher ever.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was kind of like you in the outfield and making all. Who'd you most likely? I mean, you kind of would act. I remember you really liked Tommy Hurt for a while, and you liked the paint underneath the eyes. That was
Willie McGee.
Willie.
Yeah.
We love Willie. Yes.
We would have the backstop thing that you throw the tennis ball in and bounce the ball back.
Oh yeah.
Playing catch for hours upon hours. We also rode bikes.
Yeah. Rode bikes, but we played a lot of catch, man. We used to play
yeah.
hours of baseball outside. I mean,
Mhm.
Frankie, I still brag about Frankie, the minor league pitcher who would throw, which is really funny because now I know how to catch somebody who throws really hard. I've caught like Trevor Rosenthal and a few people over the years, and those guys throw 100 miles an hour, and you got to trust that it's going to land there. I didn't know that until Frankie was throwing to me. And when you have somebody throwing 80, 90 miles an hour,
Mhm.
a pro baseball player as a young kid, and you're catching, you learn to trust it. So that's all you can do to make sure you don't get hit. So you just got to keep it still and trust the pitcher.
Yeah, we played basketball with him in the driveway.
Hours upon hours in
Late
high school.
nights. Yeah, I still remember his wife coming to the door. Frank,
Yeah.
time to come in, because he had young kids.
Yeah,
He was out hooping with us.
absolutely. He was awesome.
that's all.
Yeah.
What was your guys' neighborhood situation like? Were you guys? I imagine Fenton's a little bit spread out, but there's neighborhoods mixed in back in the '80s, and
So our neighborhood was kind of in the middle of, if you went 3 miles one way, you came out by the pools that they knocked down. 3 miles one way, you came out where like downtown Fenton is, where it's now all been redone. And 3 miles another way, you kind of came out like Murphy Flats. We were like almost smack in the middle of this three veins.
pretty busy.
And it was, well, no, it was kind of a country back road. All of the roads were real windy back roads.
Okay.
And little 2-lane, and we kind of sat in this hillside. Behind us was a bunch of farmland, so we would take 4-wheelers and bikes and go over and hit those sometimes. And then we had our neighborhood was kind of in this valley, you might say, with a lake, and so we go fishing and hang out there. We would ride our bikes around the lake was kind of a fun thing to do. So
Yep, and you guys had a pool.
for many years we did have the pool. Yep. We go jumping that in the summers and run around.
That's nice to have neighbors that have a pool. It's nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of how we grew up. And then in life, I would have said life was pretty good for all of us. I mean, we were lower middle class, but it wasn't like I knew that. I considered it a great life. We had a lot of fun. Yeah, going to church, everything normal. But let's get into your story a little bit because I don't want to steal the thunder. I mean, there's a lot. So we kind of get to right at the end of elementary school, and our lives the trajectory would change in many ways and many dynamics. So I don't know if you want to lead into that, Jason, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah, so I was 9 years old, so that would put you at 10, Josh. But the summer of '85, it was my first time going gigging for frogs with my dad and my grandpa. And my grandpa was 52 at the time, my dad was 32, and then I was 9.
Let's back up for just a second. Your dad was he was a man's man.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he was. This guy was a man's man. He had motorbikes.
Motorcycles.
He played guitar. Even had a custom made one. So
I'm looking at the apple. I can picture the tree.
yeah, and so he was. I consider him like a man's man. I mean, he was definitely
Worked on cars and would buy old pieces of junk and fix them up and flip them.
yeah, and he also we should say what he also was. He was a reverend.
Yeah. Yep.
He was a pastor.
Yep. What you would call a lay minister. He did have a congregation for a short time, but most of the time he was just, going to church and one of the ministers that would preach sometimes or get invited to go to other churches and preach.
Yeah.
So yeah, we grew up in church. It's a blessing. The longer you live, the more of a blessing you realize it is.
Amen. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to give a little backstory about your dad because I thought it was important for people to understand. Hey, you're going frog gigging. That was a natural thing for your dad. My mom apparently told me last night that they invited my dad. I didn't ever know that. So
yeah, I didn't either.
But she had mentioned that my dad apparently was invited to go with you guys that day. So interesting. I don't know. That I thought that was just an interesting, like, random thing. I was saying, hey, we're gonna have Jace on the podcast tomorrow, and she was like, about the story. Well, I said his story. I said, yeah, that's a part of it, of course. But I said, she goes, well, your dad was invited the night before to go with them. I said, interesting. So go ahead. Yeah. So you're going frog gigging. Didn't mean to get
Yeah. So we're frog gigging down in Steelville, Missouri, on the Hoosaw. And so that's like an hour and a half drive from our homes. So we drive down on a Friday night. You drive in as close as you can get to the river, and then you walk the rest of the way. And then for people that don't know what gigging for frogs is, you have a gig basically and a flashlight and a burlap sack. Shine the light on the frog, pick it, put it in the sack, and you walk up and down the river and do that all night, and then you have a big mess of frogs. So then you go home and then you
eat them.
Yeah, you eat them. Skin them.
Did you have a preferred method of cooking, or was just?
I would imagine we fried them.
Yeah.
I don't. It's funny the memories you have, and then the other ones you kind of don't remember. Like I remember having the pile of frogs and peeling the legs off and all that, but I don't remember eating them a lot. But I guess my dad and his dad, I guess they liked them. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently they went and got them. They had enough to go hunting for them. So
yeah, so we and again I say that walking up and down the river because it's pitch black and you have a flashlight. And then again, I'm 9 years old, and so my grandpa would go out ahead of us and making sure that the water wasn't too deep for me. And then so he was kind of leading the way, and then at a certain point in the night, we think he had like cramps in his legs, but then there was also some sort of a whirlpool undercurrent in that part of the river. But he called out to my dad for help. And then, so my dad told me, he said, Jason, get out of the water. So I got out on to the bank, and then my dad dove in to get to his dad. And then that was the last I heard from them. They both drowned. They went under the water. So here I am, 9 years old. I have a flashlight, but I'm just there by myself on the.
Yeah. This is in the 80s too, so it isn't like you got one of those really nice flashlights. It's probably like one of those plastic Walmart ones, if I remember right. So
yeah. So, I spent the night there next to the river, and then got up the next morning, and it was God helping me as a 9-year-old boy. I think about, when my kids got to that age, or just looking at any 9-year-old, it's like, how could they survive that? But with God's help, He directed me. I figured out which way to walk back, and I found the truck. And I remember secretly, hoping that maybe they were at the truck, that it was some kind of an initiation or something, and, maybe they'll be at the truck. But that wasn't the case. The truck was all locked up, and so in my mind, my 9-year-old mind, I'm going to walk all the way back to Fenton and tell my mom what happened. That was my plan. So sure enough, I just took off walking, and of course, I had blue jeans on, a t-shirt, and I'm soaked from the night before. Um, I ended up walking around 9 miles, and this farmer had passed me. This is Saturday morning, and then a couple hours later, he passed me again. And so then he stopped to see if I needed help, and so I told him what happened. Got in the truck with him. He took me to the sheriff. I explained to the sheriff what happened. Then I led the sheriff back to the truck and then back to the general area. So then they were able to find the bodies. Um, so yeah, that's a pretty big story.
It is.
I
It
like-
is. I mean, obviously you're there. During this going on, when they found out you, and I guess they contacted your mom during that period of time.
Yeah, she had called the authorities when we didn't come home. I guess 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm not sure what time she called.
Well, and I know that your brothers came over to our house and stayed with us. So we were all together. And my dad didn't tell me what had happened, but I could tell by the expression that he had heard the news.
Mhm.
Something had gone on. And he looked at me and said, "Josh, be close to James. He's going to need you, and Jason's going to need you." And I said, "Okay." Don't know the news. And then you came in. When they brought you in, your mom came out.
Mm-hmm.
And just, they lost it. Your brother came out of the house, and James started to see you, and he started losing it. And I looked at my dad and said, their dad's gone. So, and I didn't even know your grandpa at that time. I just knew that your
Mhm.
dad had gone. Because I didn't know, they hadn't given me any backstory. I'd known that you gone with your dad. I didn't know your grandpa had even gone. So, at that point,
You
so.
had mentioned whirlpools. Is that what they came to conclude, or is that just kind of what you guys are thinking? Or
Yeah, so they didn't do my grandma didn't have an autopsy done, so I don't know, we don't know exactly if my grandpa had something with his heart.
Hmm.
But there was definitely some sort of an undertow there. Um, and yeah, he reached out, called to my dad for help.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that? I mean, obviously you're staying on the shore all night long. I mean, in your mind, were you playing games? Do you remember if you played games?
I remember, crying out to God,
Hmm.
and then a couple times running out into the water a little bit, but coming back.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I think, as I've gotten older, learning about personality types
Mm.
and just the different ways that God had prepared me to be able to handle that type of situation. Um, and I like sharing the story because it really is bragging on God.
Mm.
It's a miracle. Yes, it's tragic, but it's also a miracle that I was able to survive and then have the family that I have now. I think about my dad and my grandpa and the legacy that you have through family
Mm.
and how, yes, that legacy was affected that night, but how God has been rebuilding that.
Mm.
And, I have 2 younger brothers besides me that have families, and I have 3 kids, and just how good God is and how, like I said, He prepares us. We don't know it until after, looking back on how He prepared us. A couple of things. The month before the accident, I had went to church camp, and I remember that's when I asked God into my heart and got
Oh,
saved.
wow. Okay.
And so, that's one of those tidbits. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense, God. He just has a way of lining things up in our lives,
Amen.
and we don't realize it. Another thing, so my grandma, which just a strong Christian lady, just
Oh,
the
yeah.
sweetest lady you would ever meet. Losing her husband and one of her sons in the same night. But she never had a driver's license. She never drove, and so me and my brothers would go and spend a week with her at a time in the summer. and we would walk everywhere. We would walk to the store, to get treats or get bread. And so the week before we went gigging for frogs, it was my first time going to my grandma's alone. And my mom told me later how we did so much walking that week. It's me and her. It's like
Hmm.
God was preparing me physically to be able to walk 9 miles. Um, and so that's powerful. Another thing, a memory I always like to share is, I remember sitting in between them in the truck on the way down. And back in those days in '85, that was before all the electronics. That was before iPods. That was before, I remember having a lot of those, like football games you play, but that was even before that, all those
Hey, the taco and stuff like
right,
that.
all those handheld things. So I just remember being alert and just paying attention. And one of the gravel roads we went down, I remember seeing this rusted out muffler on the side of the road, and we drove past it on that Friday night. And then, sure enough, the Saturday morning, I walked right past that same muffler. So I knew I was walking, the right direction.
And there was a guy who passed you, right? Isn't that this?
Yeah.
I thought you it was. So you were walking, and then some guy passed you, and then he came back, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of his demeanor, his like the way he spoke to you? Like was he comforting, or was he matter of fact? Was he
So,
old, young?
yeah, I remember he was older. Um, I don't have a lot of memories of that exchange, but he must have been, calm and caring
Mm.
for me to get in the truck with him.
The only reason I asked is because I mean something not even on the same scale, but when I was 10, I had my finger chopped off, and two random Australian construction workers took me to a hospital that was an hour away,
Hmm.
and they were like the two most perfect men to handle a lopped off finger bleeding in their car.
Yeah.
Like they made it light, they made it like comforting. It was
Hmm.
the drive felt 5 minutes, so that's the only reason I asked
Yeah.
if you had any memories of that man.
Yeah. It's very interesting the memories that I have from
Mhm.
that whole experience. Like, but we had friends in the area, and so they came to the sheriff's office and took me to their house and cleaned me up.
Mm.
And then it was my cousin that drove down to Steelville to get me. His mom stayed home, obviously, with all that going on. But my mom tells me that I had sores on my legs where wet blue jeans would rubbing back and forth.
Mm.
But like, I don't have memories. I don't have a
No,
memory of the sores, and it's like
I don't
another
either.
blessing from God that, yeah.
Yeah, I remember the funeral. Your mom's wailing.
Yeah.
That would that that haunted me as a young man for a long, long time. I mean, I can still hear it in my head if I want. The
Yeah.
grief of that. When I was growing up, when people would say something like, birthing of kids and a wailing of a birth, that was all I could equate it to because I'd never been in a birth,
Yeah.
but I'd been at that funeral and I heard your mom wail in such a way, my it just was ingrained in my head. I'd never heard grief. I'd never experienced anything like that at that time, as a young man.
Yeah, that's my mom has a very distinct wail. I've heard that. I remember, so 2 years before that, when her mom passed away at the hospital, I remember her wail in the hospital,
Mm.
and then at other funerals of her brothers. My mind. Um, but yeah, the funeral. Of course, we had closed caskets.
Hmm.
Um, and so I remember the color of those caskets, gray,
Hmm.
and just everybody coming up to you, trying to comfort you.
Yeah. When my dad passed away just a few years ago, his family actually, James went up
Yeah.
and spoke on behalf of their family, but um, that's another part that we start to intertwine because after this experience, my dad kind of steps into the gap a
Mhm.
little bit. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. I
and
remember Tony teaching me how to change oil in a vehicle.
yeah,
And, that's a cool thing too, because it's like, I know that's something my dad did, was
hmm
change oil in his vehicles and worked on cars, like I said. Um, so it's a nostalgic feeling, but when I'm changing oil, I feel close to him. I'm, and it's that way with sports. That's why, uh, I got that love of sports from him. So it's something I've had, and
Mm.
said it's something we've connected over.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, as we grew up, there'd be times my dad would be like, "Hey, Josh, I'm gonna go be with Jason for a minute. I'm gonna show him this, and just give us some space because he needs to know this." And so, like, I remember, like, I think there was some woodworking stuff a couple times, and he just kind of would grab you and kind of show you how to do things
Yeah.
um, over that period of time as you grew up next to us, and so. And that was really cool. I always thought, my dad, I don't, obviously I knew your dad, but not, we were both young. I mean, I have memories of your dad. I mean, I have memories of one time him spanking me. I think he actually spanked me once. So,
You probably deserved it.
oh yeah, I definitely did. I think I did something with the ball and bunked James or something. And, probably intentional because I was frustrated, but whatever it was. But I just remember that, um, your dad was always, I remember he always smiled, but I remember that one time he was really stern. Like he got real quick, like, boom. So just, it's funny how you have these little pockets of memories of,
Mm-hmm.
of that, but it was good, not a bad thing. And obviously the snow and, basketball. I remember your dad riding that little mini bike
Yeah.
up and down so that your brother Justin would fall in love with later on.
Mm-hmm.
But I also remember like our dads kind of connected on a lot of things, and I think that's why God put us as neighbors, right? I mean, because my dad and your dad, my dad wasn't into sports, but he was definitely a hands-on guy,
Mm-hmm.
or changing oil, building things, and that was your dad, man's
Yeah.
man, kind
I
of.
think that was most men, like in before like the next generation.
Yeah,
You think about men that are over 50, like they're pretty competent people.
Yeah.
yeah. They didn't have YouTube back then,
Right.
so they just had to figure
No.
it out. They would, buy the part at the automobile store, look at the directions, and some of that stuff took a lot longer because they just weren't sure how to do it, and
Yeah.
so
So you mentioned you have siblings, multiple, one, two,
Yeah, I have two younger brothers.
two younger brothers. How's this affected? Who has it affected the most, in your opinion?
Hmm.
I mean, obviously,
well, you think of that. I wanted to
affected
say
you
something
guys
to him
all.
is that we actually one of the things about being neighbors is we're all a year apart. So there's me, and then Jason, and then my sister Jennifer, and then
James.
and then my sister Rebecca and Justin, and we all kind of buddied up that way through the years. I mean,
Yeah.
Jennifer and James, even though they weren't dating at all, they went to prom together because they were best friends. So, so that's kind of how we all kind of, and even to this day, I would say Jen's super close to James.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca's pretty close, or was for years, with Justin. I don't know how close they are these days,
Yeah,
but
that's pretty unique to have that spacing, be neighbors. Doesn't happen very often.
no, it was God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was God. I think just really cool that our parents bonded, the relationships bonded before, pretty much instantly.
Mm.
And I'm sure that was for their relationship with God. And then
Oh, I know it was.
just really just really leaned on each other. And then definitely, after the accident, my mom hadn't worked up to that point. And so for about a year, then she joined the workforce. So we were at home, me and my brothers were home a lot alone. And so talked about or asked about those connections. So, Josh's mom, Kim, she was, you know, come over and check on us and make sure. And if we needed help with it, run over to your house.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, anytime. And that was and my dad almost treated your mom like a sibling, a sister. That's how we consider it. Afterwards,
Yeah. And we always celebrated birthdays together and would have sleepovers. We had many a sleepover, spend the night at each other's house.
do you still sleepwalk?
It's James that slept walk.
Oh, it was James that sleepwalk. Oh, okay. For some
Yeah.
reason, I was thinking it was you. Yeah, I remember one of you did. So it was James that sleepwalk. I remember her having to put the chairs up and
Up in the hallway.
hallway. Yeah.
We have one that sleepwalk. It's strange. It's strange.
So okay, so I just wanted to give you a little backstory about that.
Yeah.
So you can answer the question though. So who do you think was impacted the most? 'Cause I think you all were in unique ways.
Yeah. So Justin being the youngest, he was, I feel like it probably affected, well, really just all of us. I
Yeah.
really couldn't rank it. I think, it's God's design that, we have a father, and the way we relate to our earthly father is how we initially see God.
Mm.
That's by his design. So it definitely, when you lose your father, there's a wound there, there's a hole there. So yeah, it affected all of us, I would say.
Oh, without a doubt.
Really.
All the doubt. I would say you and Justin kind of cling to the manly part of your dad.
Mhm.
I would say, probably emotionally, your brother James was probably the one that emotionally, to some degree, um, uh, at least from an outward perspective, seems like he's probably struggled the most on that. So, but that's but I think you all had your own, everybody's unique, just like when my own dad passed away, how Jen responded and Rebecca, we were all impacted different ways. So,
Yep.
and so I would have guessed that too. I think I see different ways that it impacted each one of you from the outset. But that's not even how the story, the story continues to go, because there's another part of the story that he hasn't heard, which is, we kind of, I don't know, do you want to share through high school anything that affected you from that before we kind of jump into meeting Ange?
No, I think we go straight to that.
Okay.
God placed my wife in my life at a young age, and that's been a huge blessing.
Yep, I remember her. She really liked you. Josh, help me out here. So
Young age.
yeah, so Angie was in my grade.
Yeah.
So, and Jason was a year younger. At this point, I was hanging out with Jason a lot in his youth group. So he went to an Assembly of God's church out in House Springs. We were hanging out quite a bit with them. Great, having a great time in youth group. And Ange really just liked Jason, and Jason liked Ange, but he was a little more quieter back then.
Mhm.
So but that all, you guys came together, and then at the same kind of not too long afterwards, her mom would find somebody. So
Yeah. So my my mom was single, after the accident, and she definitely put us kids ahead of her personally. As far as dating, that's always can be an awkward thing. I remember we were still young. I remember she had a guy she was interested in, but we did not get along with his kids. So that's just an example of pursue it any further. Um,
I remember that.
yeah, his kids that were even younger than us, and we just didn't get. But anyway, so my mom was active in a single small group at church, and then my wife, well, we were dating at the time, but her uncle had lost his wife due, due to cancer, and so Angie's mom had connected my mom with her brother through that small group, and just to be a resource and comfort. And they ended up hitting it off. And so me and Angie were dating at the time, and so they actually got married right before us.
I know.
Yeah.
I always thought that was really cool. Angie's uncle
Yeah.
married your mom,
That was funny.
and you and Angie married.
So, yeah.
And Louis is family to us too. That's the other part, is my dad loved Louis. And my mom and Pat have stayed close. And even through now this new chapter, our families are hanging out every Christmas. Even though we're not next door neighbors anymore, we would get together intentionally. So, at least once a year, if not multiple. My parents were, they went on vacation together to Hawaii. They did all sorts of things throughout that. And even today, my mom and Pat are still best of friends.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you guys, did you guys honeymoon similar places? Was it, how far apart was it? I mean, was it
they
similar time frame, or?
Yeah, my mom and Louis got married in March, and then got married in May.
Oh, so wow. Yeah, like right before.
Yep.
Incredible.
Yeah. And it was good. And
Yeah.
and he had 3 sons, and she had 3 sons. So now they became a family of,
Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Brady Bunch.
Yeah. It was 3-3. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that was, a blessing. So Justin, my youngest brother, he would have been 12 at the time. So then he had Louis as a father figure
Mm,
and still does. So that's a blessing.
amen.
And James too, I think he was going to college around that time, but
Yeah, he was.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember going over to the basement, hanging out with him, and
hmm
him pulling out some Christian CDs when he was showing me his new room at the new house and all
Yeah.
that. So,
That had to be a hard day for you, seeing your mom get remarried. I'd imagine. Maybe not. Maybe it was a happy day. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But I'd
Yeah.
imagine there's some mixed feelings for you personally and your brothers. And
Yeah, I think it was mostly positive, I think, from the standpoint of, the years that it went by.
Mm.
Um, so it was definitely a good thing for her to have somebody. James, we're getting to the ages where we weren't around.
I think it was a good situation too because he had also experienced a loss in his life. And
Right.
so there was a
Yeah,
a
they
different
bonded.
type. I think it wasn't like some single dude who had no life and all of a sudden
Right.
your mom, but the fact that this guy also, like your mom, had a family and God just kind of came in and changed things around, or you might say, or allowed things to be changed around.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so,
it was a big blessing. I think, if you haven't lost someone close to you, don't have an understanding of it, just how it changes your life from that point forward. So yeah, they definitely bonded over that experience and could lean on each other.
yeah, for sure. Well, hey, Scott, that was a great conversation with Jason. Man, I really, really appreciated his thoughts and insight and his story. It was impactful for me because I grew up with him. My dad and mom and my family were a part of that. Obviously, he became like family to us, and he made some really, really cool points, I thought, along the way. Obviously, one of them kind of stood out to you. You mentioned, which was
Yeah, he had mentioned thinking about your heart as a house, and when you become a believer, you essentially not that he needs your permission, but you let Jesus into your heart. And if your heart's a house, you got to let him into all the rooms, all the closets, all the dark rooms where you haven't turned the light on in a while. Because if you don't, then you're not allowing. You're minimizing what Jesus can do in your life.
Yeah, and one of the things that stood out to me was he talked about how it's a process of recovery. It's a recovering. You're constantly this traumatic event is constantly a process of recovery. Yeah, and I thought it was cool how he mentioned how Celebrate Recovery really helped him out in that process. So for those who might have had some kind of traumatic event, they should check out Celebrate Recovery. It's been around a long time. Parachurch ministry that does a lot of good stuff. So. With that, though, we appreciate Jason and his time, and we appreciate you guys listening in today for that episode. And don't forget to
like and subscribe to AAA. We got AAA. I got my new hat on today.
That's right. Well, don't forget to like and subscribe. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to check out merch as well, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya. You're safe.